Hi, second graders. Welcome back to Reader's Workshop. Today, we're going to start off by looking back at something that we learned previously in the year about understanding literary language. And remember, literary language is the special language that authors use to make their stories sound interesting and wonderful. So, we're going to look back at this chart that we have seen before and think about the different ways that we can understand literary language as a reader. So some things that we can do is we can pay attention to special language. We talked about that the other day, really thinking about how authors use special words, and we can think about the special language and the precise language that they're using to help us paint that clear picture in our head. We can also think about when two things are compared, we can think about how they're alike. For example, on our screen, we can see that this boy looks so mad. He's as mad as an erupting volcano or sizzling like a hot potato. And then we can also figure out what playful language really means. So when we think about things that an author sometimes say in a book, right, it doesn't exactly mean what they're writing. Right? For example, when we see this picture to here, I'll zoom in a little bit if I can. When it says it's a piece of cake, right? It doesn't mean something is actually a piece of cake. It means something that is really easy. So today what we're going to do is we're going to really think about some of the things that readers can do to pay attention to special language in our books. So today I want to teach you that when readers study an author's craft or what the author is writing, they pay attention to the words that an author has used. So they notice ways in which the author uses words to make even simple, ordinary things be extraordinary and special. And they wonder, what does the author really mean? So I'm going to show you that as an example in my wonderful book, James and the Giant Peach. We're going to really think about how the author is using his words to sound so interesting. And it's not just an ordinary, boring sentence. It's really using the language to sound interesting and extraordinary. And we're going to really think about what the author actually means. So yesterday we left off thinking about how poor James is living in this house with mean, nasty ants, and he's all by himself. So we're going to start reading chapter 2, and then I'm going to highlight and I'm going to talk about really special sentences in this page, and we're going to think about what's so special about it. Here is James Henry Trotter after he had been living with his aunts for 3 whole years, which is when this story really begins. For now, there came a morning when something rather peculiar happened to him. And this thing, which as I say was only rather peculiar, soon caused a second thing to happen, which was very peculiar. And then the very peculiar thing, in its own turn, caused a really fantastically peculiar thing to happen. It all started on a blazing hot day in the middle of the summer. Aunt Sponge, Aunt Spiker, and James were all out in the garden. James had been put to work as usual. This time, he was chopping wood for the kitchen stove. Aunt Sponge and Aunt Spiker were sitting comfortably in deck chairs nearby, sipping tall glasses of fizzy lemonade and watching him to see that he didn't stop work for one moment. Now let's listen to this next part, because this part is pretty funny, and it's also very interesting the way the author used words in literary language to explain what's happening. Listen closely. Aunt Sponge was enormously fat and very short. She had small piggy eyes, a sunken mouth, and one of those white slappy faces that looked exactly as though it had been boiled. She was like a great, white, soggy, overboiled cabbage. Now, let's think about what the author is saying here. The author could have written that maybe Aunt Sponge was kind of not very attractive, right? But instead, he chose to write something much more extraordinary. He chose to use his words to describe exactly what she looked like. And he's saying she had a face that looked like it had been boiled. It looked like a great white, soggy, overboiled cabbage. Now, though it's not very nice, it is kind of funny, and it really gives you a really good picture in your head of what Aunt Sponge actually looks like. Now, I'm going to read another sentence, and I want you to think about how the author is using the words to make us see it in our minds, and he's showing us exactly what's happening, but sometimes it might be a little bit different than what he's actually saying, so let's pay close attention. Aunt Spiker, on the other hand, was lean and tall and bony, and she wore steel-rimmed spectacles that fixed onto the end of her nose with a clip. She had a screeching voice and long, wet, narrow lips, and whenever she got angry or excited, little flecks of spit would come shooting out of her mouth as she talked. And there they sat, these two ghostly hags, sipping their drinks and every now and again screaming at James to chop faster and faster. They also talked about themselves. each one saying how beautiful she thought she was. Aunt Sponge had a long handled mirror on her lap, and she kept picking it up and gazing at her own hideous face. Okay, listen to this sentence. I look and smell, Aunt Sponge declared, as lovely as a rose. Just feast your eyes upon my face, observe my shapely nose. So if we think about what the author is saying here, right? What is the author trying to show us? He's trying to show us that maybe Aunt Sponge and Aunt Spiker are not very nice people on the inside, and they're also not very nice people on the outside, right? He's saying that they are not very pretty. He's describing them as tall and bony or looking like an overboiled cabbage, but he's saying that the aunts are saying, oh, look how beautiful I am. So they're kind of sounding pretty conceited. So I want to show you our chart for today and the strategy that I want you to work on for today. So we've been really thinking about how we can become an expert on an author's craft or what the author is doing to help us teach us about their book. So if we look at our chart, right, we have been thinking about how we can notice how the author helps us make vivid pictures in our mind. We can use the precise words to understand the story even better. And today what we're going to do is we're going to really think about the extraordinary language and ask, what does it really mean? So today when you are reading, I want you to make sure you're really looking out for how the author is using the words and the language in the story to sound extraordinary. It's not boring words that are kind of making you fall asleep, right? It's funny, it might be interesting, it might be scary, right? They can use their language in the book to really make it sound extraordinary. So remember, you're going to set your timer for 25 minutes. You're going to read the whole time, and you're going to be on the lookout for extraordinary language. And if you see some, you can always jot it down on a Post-it note and make sure that you don't forget about it. All right, you are all ready to go read. Off you go.